this is what shocks me, is that I think people are almost having two separate conversations about this election. And they can do that because we can all live in our own little bubbles and our own, much of it fueled by the fact that we spend 7 to 8 hours a day on average, more if you're younger, staring at screens, looking at the same things over and over, reinforcing our existing opinions.
Yeah.
And that is this election. And mainstream media, I think, well deservedly so, has lost the trust of the American people. So we don't have a single newscast or two that we all tend to sit down and watch every evening, which tells us a story we all generally agree with. That world is gone.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Welcome, everyone. I interviewed Christine Rosen about a week before the election, so understand that as you listen to this fabulous episode. By the way, have you subscribed yet? It's free. So when I say subscribe, I just mean make sure you're downloaded every single episode. Just subscribe, hit the button. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're at Rumble, YouTube, and of course, Spotify. So anywhere you download podcasts, we would love to have you in our audience always. We're trying to bring you interesting people, and Christine Rosen is one of those people. She is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, really cool organization. She's big into, her research areas are American history, society and culture, technology and culture, and feminism. And we cover a little bit of all of that here. She gives us the review of Hillary Clinton's latest bio, or actually not bio, her memoir, which you got to listen to hear. You do. You just need to hear it all. But this is a great conversation. So some of this, since you're hearing this now after the election, you'll go, oh, she was right. Or, boy, were they wrong. Either way, enjoy Christine Rosen. This won't be the last time we have her on. She is a fascinating guest. She's next. Christine, welcome. It is great to have you. This book it's so timely, obviously. It's so relevant. The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World. I worry about this. I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I watch them looking at their phones or their devices a lot. And I'm thinking to myself, at that age, I was out with my friends. We'd get together in the same physical room. We wouldn't just FaceTime. How bad is this really?
Well, I think it's much worse than we expected when we all embraced these technologies, right? I mean, my kids are about the same age as yours. And no matter how draconian you are as a parent, putting limits on screen time, you have to do your homework first. Yeah. What has changed, I think, and especially in the last 5 to 10 years for the generation of people who are just now entering adulthood, is that their entire social lives are also on their phones or on some form of screen. So even if you're trying to limit and set good boundaries for them so they can learn how to self-police and not spend too much online, everything they do in terms of interaction happens on the phone, which means there's an opportunity cost to that. Because if you're staring at a screen, you're not looking at your fellow human beings. You're not, as you said, getting together in real life. And there's a lot of data now that does show us that young people in particular are spending more and more time physically alone, apart from their friends, apart from their family, alone, just physically alone. But we're wired as human beings to interact in person, to see each other in person, to look at each other's faces, read each other's emotions. And I think those skills are starting to deteriorate for younger generation as a result.
Yeah. And I wonder what that's going to mean. I remember when I was a teenager, I finally got my own phone, and I would sit in my room and talk to my friends on the phone. And it was just that vocal thing. I see my daughter doing that on FaceTime. But they can honestly be on FaceTime together.
Yes.
And not talking to each other. Like they're in each other's presence. And my daughter will be like, she'll come downstairs with her phone and say, I need something to eat. And I'm like, who are you on FaceTime with? It's okay. She's doing her laundry right now. So what is this togetherness without togetherness? So it's all really strange. And you said it's worse than we thought it was going to be. I would tend to agree with that. Is it unstoppable though? I mean, the world is going in this direction. Is adaptation really a bad thing?
No, and we've always adapted to new technologies. I think there are some differences with the smartphone and the social media platforms and some of the other apps we tend to use on a day-to-day basis that's a little bit distinct from, say, even desktop computers, television, movies, telegraph, telephone. You can go way back. And that this technology really has become ubiquitous in a very short span of time. So the way that human beings are quite adaptable, but also we're very wired evolutionarily to learn certain behaviors slowly. There's something called human nature for a reason. We were meant to actually be in each other's presence, read each other's unspoken signals to try to understand if we should trust each other. So what worries me about the adaptations we're making now is that they all tend to go in one direction. And by that, I mean, I don't think a lot of young people today think there's a qualitative difference between being on FaceTime all the time and being in the presence of their friends. But there is, we know this. I mean, there's research to that effect, but there's also, again, these are experiential things. It's a different thing when you're sitting across from someone face to face and they're telling you something important. Once you put a mediating device between that, it alters the relationship. Is it all bad? Of course not, but it's a different qualitative experience. And we are choosing more and more often the mediated experience over the in-person one because it's easier.
It is easier. I mean, we get a choice with my kids' parent-teacher conferences. You can either go over to campus and sit with them face to face and run from one room to the next.
Yes.
Or you can just do them via Zoom. Zoom is way easier.
Yeah.
And maybe we are losing something in the process, but in that case, I'm all about the Zoom call.
Well, I have no problem with that when people make that choice for efficiency or for, like, we couldn't be having this conversation without the technology.
Right.
They're really good tools in many, many ways. My concern is when we allow them into our most intimate relationships, when we allow the tracking and the surveillance that these devices and these platforms encourage. Soon there'll be sensors on our bodies. That the amount of things that can be read about us and sent to third parties or sent to people we might not want to know those things about ourselves, that's a concern.
That is a big concern. I think a lot of people are worried about their privacy these days when they start getting ads and emails from companies or organizations that they've never interfaced with before.
Yes.
But somebody sold your email, on this whole list, and you just didn't happen to read the fine print and know what to do to avoid that. My husband came home the other day and he goes, I have about 300 new emails on my phone. Guess how many of them are from political campaigns?
Yes. Oh, yes. Right. This is the season, right? Where it's like a deluge of political ads and text. Well, and your attention is being sold in real time every time you go online. Although we all know this, I don't think we understand just how granular the detail is about our own lives. And particularly if you use social media apps like Instagram or TikTok, the amount of information you give off unknowingly just by spending 30 seconds looking at a video, or actually in most cases 10 seconds, and then what you scroll to next and what you spend a moment longer on than something else, all of that is information about yourself that is being sold in real time, not just to corporations, but there's a whole lot of things down the line we should worry about in terms of your mental health state, your emotional state, how easily manipulated you can be at certain times of day or when you're upset about certain sorts of things. So again, we're willingly giving all this kind of information to others without really thinking through what that does for privacy.
So what you're saying is those movie scenes where the guy's standing like with a big dial and knowing what mood you're in, all that is really kind of true. And that's a little horrifying.
Yes.
When you saw how quickly, I mean, we always, these days, we tend to go back to COVID and talk about the draconian things that were implemented and the way that an entire country, an entire world was influenced by a handful of people, whether it was the World Health Organization, the NIH, Fauci, whoever, their governments, whoever it was, there was so much fear stoked that we were willing to do whatever we had to do to save our lives, to save the lives of others. And boy, if that wasn't an experiment, I don't know what was. And there were, I remember, listen, I was still working. I was covering the NFL and I was covering the Olympics in Tokyo. And we had to use these apps that followed us around so that they would know, oh, she was at that store across from the Olympic Village and we had a case there, she might have a case. Beep, 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 beep. It's like, it's crazy.
Well, and in China, those apps were then weaponized by the government to prevent people from getting on mass transit, for example, if they had a certain color on there, if they had previously met with someone who might themselves have met with a dissident, for example, that could be tracked. Yes, the traceability is huge. And I think what the platforms have always known, but what a lot of us finally woke up to during COVID, was that fear and anger will get people to do a lot of things they might otherwise not do. And the thing that keeps you looking at that screen and scrolling and finding more of what you're already feeling, fear, anger, and anxiety. These emotions are very powerful. And a lot of our tech companies have figured out how to really double down on that, which for them just translates into attention and money. It doesn't matter if our politics goes into this, cesspool of anger and recrimination and, extreme polarization. They're still going to make money on our attention. So I think that's the design choices that have been baked into these systems now. People are starting to have a healthy skepticism about that, and that's good.
Well, I hope so. How are you seeing that healthy skepticism? Because I like to believe I have it. If you are human, you're probably having trouble sleeping. And we need sleep so much, but between stress and anxiety and anything else, sleep has become a huge problem for people. And with my current schedule and my responsibilities and my shoulder surgeries, I'm telling you, I have problems sleeping too. But let me tell you what I found. It is helping me sleep so much better. And it's not a drug. It's not a prescription. It is a cream. I put it on at bedtime. Simple. And I was really skeptical, but I tried it once and I got to say, I was blown away because now I sleep great. It worked fast. It was effective. The company is Sleep Cream and it's SLEEP sleep, CREME, like creme, sleep cream. They use all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. They've got a new rose scent that I just love. And so I just put it on in the evening. I put it on the bottoms of my feet, the insides of my forearms, sort of where the delicate skin is. That works best for me. And within minutes, it helps me relax and allows my body to do what it's supposed to do, which is sleep. So you can find them at sleepcream.com. Just try Sleep Cream a couple nights. See if it works for you as well as it does for me. And if you don't experience better sleep, Sleep Cream will refund your purchase, guaranteed. You don't have to return anything. So go to sleepcream.com. And that's sleepcream.com with cream spelled CREME.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY at checkout to save $20 on your first order. Game Day, all one term, GAMEDAY at checkout for $20 in savings. Look, if you're ready for your best sleep ever, sleep, CREME.com. Well, I hope so. How are you seeing that healthy skepticism? Because I like to believe I have it, but I'm not sure I have enough of it. Where do you see it? How do you see it manifesting itself?
Well, one of the things that's encouraging to me is that, and with apologies to an entire generation of American children on whom this experiment was run unwittingly, parents are now really trying to enact boundaries and limits on smartphone use in schools. So you have these efforts to do bell to bell, like the morning bell and the closing bell, no phones, just no phones necessary. Teachers like it. Students like it. It's actually the parents who tend to be difficult because they want to monitor and track their kids throughout the day. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of interesting and truly bipartisan effort on Capitol Hill to place some limits on the social media platforms targeting children. So I think, look, adults, we have to make our own choices. We're grown-ups. We face the consequences. But when it comes to an 8 or 9-year-old, they shouldn't be on Instagram which is a platform designed for adults. They shouldn't be on Instagram looking at harmful content or being, contacted by strangers because the platform, which knows that this is happening, turns a blind eye and says it's parents' responsibility. So you see people like Katie Britt of Alabama, very conservative, and John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, very liberal. They've come together on some social media bills. Tom Cotton and a very liberal senator from Hawaii. These people are all sitting down and going, okay, how can we help parents? This is a collective action problem at some level. So that encourages me.
Oh, that is encouraging. I hadn't heard all those names in a similar group coalescing to do that. I remember speaking or moderating a group of tech people talking about social media and saying, look, at what point, kids need to exercise. They need to get out. They need to do things. They need to play. So at what point are you willing to say, make these things, activate the kids somehow? They can't progress on a certain app until they go and run around the block or get on a bike or something. And there were promises made, but do you see anything on that side, like the app creators and these big companies that are creating all of these games and ways to attract kids, putting anything healthy into it?
No. I mean, I'll give you an example. So remember when Pokemon Go was big for a while?
Yes.
Like, oh, look, everyone's running around and actually moving, and it didn't last for one thing. And another thing is, like, there were lots of sort of unintended consequences of kids running around with a screen in front of their face, running into things and having accidents. But here's all you need to know about the people who design this stuff. They don't let their own kids use it. They do not allow their children to use these apps, to have these, iPads in front of their faces from the age of 1 on. They do not do that. And there's a lot of evidence, they're putting them in Montessori schools and Waldorf schools, which have no technology. They understand the actual harms of these things for children. So they don't let their own kids use them, but they're
kind of makes me mad. I think that would kind of make people really ticked off.
If they should.
But it is, in a way, it's kind of like what TikTok in China.
Yeah.
China don't let the kids have access to the same material American kids and the rest of the world has.
That's right.
And that should tell parents everything they need to know about TikTok. We don't allow TikTok in our house.
That's good. No one should have TikTok on their phone. It's basically a spyware app.
Exactly. Take
it off your phone.
I wish we could do something about that. There was legislation in motion about banning TikTok here in the United States. Is that just stalled because we're in the silly season? Is that something you ever see being restored and focused on by Congress?
Yes. I mean, I think what's moving forward now is not a ban, but they are going to have to sell. They can no longer have Chinese ownership. And that's moving forward. Again, bipartisan. People understand this is a national security issue.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of, there are people who are vying. There are American companies and American businessmen and businesswomen who are vying to buy it. Like there are all kinds of, there's a lot of churn right now with TikTok, but they will have to divest. The fact that they do not want to should tell any user of TikTok what their goal is, which is to send data to the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party. It is not just to entertain you and get you to do the next TikTok craze.
No. And people should not be afraid to explain that to their kids, that there are adversaries in the world and we have to pay attention to them and protect ourselves from them. I hope people do that. At the risk of getting a little political here, but it is that time of year, that time of every 4 years. So it's just, we are just in this massive moment. And it is strange to me that one of the candidates for president was put in that position, wasn't voted for. And it's kind of almost like what you're talking about, this lack of experience. Like there was she was kind of coronated by a few people, and they can say, oh, she got on the phone and she got all the delegates. That's a very different thing from going out and campaigning. And and then she hasn't even really campaigned very much. And, she's in an authentic way. Do you see this is this going to start something? Is this going to set a trend, do you think? Or are we angry enough or startled enough to say, not us?
I think one of the things that struck me a lot about watching this election season is that it really does reveal just how little of a shared reality we all live in. And by that, I mean, I was having dinner. I live in Washington, D.C. I've been here a long time. I have friends all across the political spectrum. And I do mean like proud former anarchist all the way to the most right-wing person on earth. And I love them all. And we usually don't talk about politics, but now I was having dinner with some friends, and one very progressive woman was shocked to hear this story about about Vice President Harris's husband having been accused of assaulting a woman, and also having and this was confirmed, that he actually got their family's nanny pregnant when in his previous marriage, which ended his marriage. She had heard none of this.
Oh, that's amazing.
She's
That
in
is,
her early
that's
30s.
amazing.
She gets most of her news on social media. She tends to be left leaning. So most of what she sees, most of what she clicks on gives her more of the same. She had never heard either of these stories. And this shocked me. I mean, I know that everyone lives in a bubble, but when I explained to her, I said, well, look, here are the stories. He was actually asked about the assault charge on a cable news show, not specifically, but he said, well, it's a distraction, didn't deny it. And then the whole media moved on.
Yes.
So this is what shocks me, is that I think people are almost having two separate conversations about this election. And they can do that because we can all live in our own little bubbles and our own, much of it fueled by the fact that we spend 7 to 8 hours a day on average, more if you're younger, staring at screens, looking at the same things over and over, reinforcing our existing opinions.
Yeah.
And that is this election. And mainstream media, I think, well deservedly so, has lost the trust of the American people. So we don't have a single newscast or two that we all tend to sit down and watch every evening, which tells us a story we all generally agree with. That world is gone.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Oh, I mean, have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Well, introducing Share Right, healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community, and forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Think about what you could do. 30 to 50%, all that saving? Wow. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve, and precisely when you need it. From routine checkups to unexpected emergencies, with Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. So empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya, Tafoya, to learn more and see how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya. So it's SHARERIGHT.org/Tafoya for healthcare done the right way.
We don't have a single newscast or two that we all tend to sit down and watch every evening, which tells us a story we all generally agree with. That world is gone.
Yeah. And maybe is something positive in that, because if we all did trust one voice and that voice was dishonest or that voice wasn't trustworthy, that wouldn't be good for anyone either. So, it is interesting how Fox News really started the divide in news that we digest.
Yes.
In that everyone else seemed to be pretty firmly left leaning.
Yes.
Even if it was just a little or a lot, you get this competitor, and now everyone has to kind of decide what they're going to view or what they're going to listen to, or if they're going to be willing to listen to a little of each. But you're right. Some stories have been propagated. I wonder if you saw J.D. Vance take on Jake Tapper on CNN this weekend about the way that CNN promoted it got very feisty, didn't it? But I thought J.D. Vance was masterful, and I do think that Jake Tapper was a little bit on his heels with that one. What did you think?
I agree. I mean, Tapper generally keeps his cool in interviews. I mean, he can be tough, but he betrayed some emotion there, and in a way that I think was not useful for whatever point he was trying to make. He was trying to, it struck me that at times he was actually trying to score points on Vance as if Vance was a political opponent rather than a political candidate for office whom he was supposed to be interviewing.
Right.
And Vance knew that walking in. Vance has been very, very good about, he goes into the belly of the beast all the time, sometimes multiple times a day for the Sunday shows. And he's himself, and he says what he believes, and he takes questions and he pushes back. He did that in the vice presidential debate as well, which I think he showed himself. I don't agree with him on every policy stand he takes, but he is one of the four people on the ticket. He's probably the best at handling the media. Trump is his own thing. He's kind of, Trump is Trump, and he's, he does his, media is the enemy of the people stuff. But Vance is very good. He understands the game and he plays it very well, usually kind of doing a little bit of a runaround around his interview. And I think he got under Tapper's skin in an interesting way during that interview.
I think he's managed to do that, as you said, in multiple forums or on multiple shows on Sundays. And And he is not afraid. And I think that even some people who didn't want to like him can't help but admire his skills in that arena. It is, again, the book is The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World. It's interesting to me, Christine. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a psychologist, and I said to him, man, you've got to see it constantly, that it is really hard to be human. And he immediately said back to me, that's why so many people try so hard not to be human. And to sort of almost, it's the way we present ourselves online, our very best photo of ourselves. We take pictures of these amazing meals that we're eating and share those pictures as though this is the life I always live, or isn't this so cool? Or, let's take a baseball team. In order to put together a starting lineup, managers now almost always rely on metrics and numbers and stats and these data-driven qualities rather than their gut. I know Judge isn't doing well in this series, so I'm going to move him, because they go to the metrics, they go to the measurements, the data, which is kind of not trusting your gut, not trusting your heart, not trusting just your instincts. What do you make of that development?
Well, I think that's really a very good way of summarizing why I wanted to write this book. And it's that, so I come out of the humanities. I'm a historian by training. So I care about facts. I spent a lot of time in archives. But what I've noticed is that we are not trusting our human judgment, our human instincts, the things that actually have taken millennia for us to develop. Things like, if I'm sitting there frowning with my arms crossed, like I'm looking at you now, that's telling you something. I don't have to say a word. And it might be one of a few emotions. Whereas if I smile, if I have open hand gestures, all of these things are kind of wired, but they're also learned behaviors, right? So if you visit a country overseas, they'll have different sense of physical space and physical boundaries. So there's differences, but these are all human ways we read each other. We don't trust ourselves anymore. We turn to the technology because we mistrust our own judgment and our own feelings. And if there's not a quantitative, equation or an algorithm that tells us something, we think, oh, it's not real. It's mushy somehow. Yeah. I would like us to remember that those instincts, those ways of knowing, even if they're not quantifiable, are hugely important, because they're not just what make us individuals and human beings. They're what allow us to get along. And so, for example, if we can fill every single moment that we have, like a second or two to wait, by staring at our phones or doing something, removing ourselves from our physical surroundings, we change the way public space operates. We change our own ability to be patient. That has huge ramifications culturally down the line. It means we have more air rage, more road rage, more impatience with each other politically. There's a lot of intolerance that I think comes from habits and behaviors that we've trained ourselves into without maybe even realizing it. We don't want to be those people. And actually, in survey data, people will say, oh, people are so rude on their phones all the time. And then when the follow-up question is, well, do you ever do that? They're like, oh, never. And it's not true, because we all do that, right?
We all do it, yeah.
So we're aware, but we're not assessing the real cost to what it means to be a human being.
I want to touch on two more things with you before I let you go. First of all, you said your history is your, that's really, you're a historian. When you want, the more I read and the more I see in the world, the more I distrust a lot of people and things and sources. And I love reading history. Absolutely love it. Is there a go-to author for you? Is there a go-to resource or a couple of people that when you read that, you're getting the right stuff?
Yeah, I would say, speaking to if it's talking about contemporary stuff, I love the Free Press, which is this sort of startup. They're hosted by Substack, but it's a startup, basically publishing arm that Barry Weiss, who left the New York Times, started up. It's great. She has people from all across the political spectrum writing there, and it's well-reported stuff. I still read, I read the Wall Street Journal. I read the New York Times. I always read all of these with a skeptical eye, and I read the news side differently than I read the opinion side and all that. But I think I think everybody has to approach their sources more skeptically. So as a historian, just because someone's in academia these days doesn't mean they're going to be writing a better history book. And there are some wonderful I mean, look, everything Gordon Wood writes, everyone should read, particularly about the revolution and about early American history. Gordon Wood, top-notch, wonderful guy. Read everything he's written. So there are some scholarly historians who I would always trust. But, I think institutionally, academia has some serious problems now in terms of the kind of ideologically motivated histories we churn out. The 1619 Project, another example of an attempt to really undermine our story of our country's foundings. So I think people really do have to be skeptical and kind of don't just assume that if someone's teaching at Harvard, that means they're telling you what actually happened. You need to seek out alternative stories sometimes.
No question. I mean, I think we're seeing that so vividly here in this post-October 7th world of the way that academia is responding and to this, to anti-Semitism, to Israel, to all of it is just shocking, I think, to a lot of people who held Harvard and MIT and, in high regard. And the final thing I'll ask you is being the historian that you are, and also a voracious reader and writer, Hillary Clinton has another book out. Truth be told, I have not read any of them because I'm simply not interested. And it seems like a lot of time to give to someone I really have no respect for or regard for. But you have been a true pro and you've done your work. How's her latest tome?
Okay, I've read this, ladies and gentlemen, so you don't have to. It definitely reads like what it is, which is a book written by committee. She thanks several co-authors in this one. So she has like a chief ghostwriter and then like minions of other ghostwriters, and it's addled with cliches. And here's the thing about memoir. If you're going to write a memoir, particularly if you're a political figure whose life has already been reported on, you need to tell us something honest or reassess your own behavior in a way that's going to draw readers in and make them rethink what they think they know about you. She's a very public figure with a very long history. There's nothing in this book except her doubling down on her worst impulses. So the book was supposed to make her look like the kinder, happier, wonderful, enjoying my grandma years, sort of I'm wearing cool caftans and doing the, coastal chic grandma look. And I did a Broadway show and look at all these cool things. I'm having so much fun, but it's just overkill because you don't believe her. Because when it comes down to it, she keeps coming back. She's absolutely obsessed with Donald Trump and her loss to Donald Trump. She still doesn't understand why she lost. She repeats, Russia collusion hoax. She has all of these conspiracy theories and really quite an 8-page unhinged rant imagining what the world will look like if a week from now Donald Trump wins the election. It made me I actually for the first time felt something for Hillary Clinton I'd never thought I'd feel. It was pity. I thought, she needs to get over it. And she really needs to step back and think about why the country rejected her. It wasn't just because they loved Trump.
No, it was
because
not.
They were telling her no for a number of reasons. So in that case, in that sense, it really fails as a memoir. It's hugely revealing of her character and not necessarily in a good way. And I really, truly hope it is the last memoir she's decides to write because
she's
I've
written
had
3
enough.
of them, hasn't she? Is it 3 now?
Well, if you count, like there was the Secretary of State one, I think it's like 4, 3.
Oh,
There's
Lord.
so many. It's too many.
That's enough. We've already had enough of Hillary. I don't know why they think they can keep. How do they do well? Do they sell?
They do because it's like built in. There's a kind of, they pay so much for these books that the publisher actually has to make sure it sells. Okay. And so, there's bulk purchases. Her foundation buys them and then sends her to go talk to, I mean, it's like Oprah, like it's just a whole thing that's separate. Yeah. Like those of us who write for a living, but not at that scale, just kind of marvel at it. It's like, okay, it's a totally different way of publishing a book.
Christine, I'd much rather read your writing than Hillary's any day of the week. Her latest book, The Extinction of Experience, Being Human in a Disembodied World, but you can find Christine Rosen. I mean, just Google her and you'll find all of her stuff. It's so worth reading. I always end my podcast by saying, be brave and do good. And I would say your willingness to be brave and jump into another Hillary bio or, memoir was courageous. And you've done good by giving us the nutshell review that tells us we don't need to buy it. So
don't waste your money or your time. I beg of you.
Christine, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Michelle.